this week's Rise Up, I want to talk about climate change and climate justice. Because this week we hit another dire milestone as the ratio of planet warming carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. While all the talk about CO2 parts per million and how many degrees Celsius the planet has already warmed can be confusing at times, President Biden put the climate crisis front and center this week.
Joint Chiefs told us the greatest threat facing America was global warming, because there'll be significant population movements, fights over land, millions of people leaving places because they're literally sinking.
Climate change constitutes a global emergency, and the pressure is on President Biden and the rest of the G7 leaders to commit to big, bold mitigation efforts. And while it might seem as if an issue like a rapidly warming planet would actually impact all nations equally, the story of global warming is also a story of geopolitical and racial injustice. Scientists have been warning for decades that the wealthy countries whose emissions caused the crisis will not be the ones who will bear the brunt of the damage. Instead, rising seas will disproportionately threaten small island nations, while droughts will ravage African and South American countries far more than their counterparts in Europe and North America. But the racial imbalance isn't limited to international inequities. Right here in the United States, the worst effects of climate change are already falling most heavily on Black, brown, and indigenous communities. Studies show that people of color are twice as likely to experience increased heat stress in their neighborhoods, an ugly legacy from the history of redlining. Black people are also most likely to live in flood-prone areas. And even when government agencies like FEMA come in and help, studies show that people of color are often left behind. Meanwhile, the face of the climate movement is often portrayed as mostly white, even as Black, brown, and indigenous activists have been fighting for recognition of this issue for generations. But today's environmental movement is finally beginning to reflect the diversity that has always been there. Young people around the world have run out of patience, and now they're leading the way in the fight to cut emissions and protect ancestral lands from rising temperatures and seas. So it's up to us to rise up and join them. This issue can seem daunting. How can one person make a difference in a crisis engulfing the entire planet? To start, we can follow the example being set for us by young people. Time is of essence, and while individual actions like flying less often, eating less meat, and divesting from fossil fuel companies are good, what we need is big systemic change. The American Jobs Plan, currently stalled by Republicans in Congress, has billions in funding for climate action. We should demand it be passed and think even bigger. Our children and kids all over the world should not bear this burden alone. It's time to rise up together before it's too late. Because as the kids say, there is no planet B.